Serious drug dealers of Reddit, have you ever called CPS on a client? If so, what's the story? So, I'm only posting because I have been clean and sober for 3.5 years now, and anything I say I have already been convicted for, and I've officially finished all of my legal issues. I have never officially called Child and Family Services, but I had this one mother who used to constantly call me for meth. And I had never been to her house before. I was a bit of a sketchbag and didn't trust anybody, but after a few months I built a relationship with her where I felt at ease going to her house. When I went to go drop some off, it was child tax day. I never knew she was a mother, normally not an issue for me. I could not care less. I walked into the house and the smell was unbelievable. Cigarettes, sweat, sheet and piss. There was broken glass on the floor, 12-inch burn circles on the floor, pup on the floors. The TV was smashed, the bathroom door was literally torn off, and in the hallway, I has seen a little toddler that was walking around with no diaper on. He had his own pup all over him. He was so malnourished he was grey. The mother came to give me her money and I took the bag of meth. I had put it in my pocket, and I told her to buy some diapers for her kid. I told her that she would have to find her dope somewhere else, and walked away. A good friend of mine who had always tried to help me out was a social worker. And I told her who she was and where she lived and gave her some details so she could make a final decision. I'll always remember that kid. The last I heard he had been taken away and the mother was in jail. I wish him the best of luck in this cruel world. Edit. Thank you all so much for the support. I didn't expect for this to blow up as much as it did. I love and appreciate all of you. Second edit. I want everybody to know that I understand I was not a good guy. I know that this one incident does not make everything I did magically disappear. I was a wreck. I helped people ruin their lives. I live with my decisions every day. I made choices that will ultimately affect the rest of my life. I have forgiven myself for everything I've done because it's behind me. I'm not that person anymore. I'm nowhere near the person I was 3 years ago. All I can do is focus on being better every day and moving on in my life. Yes, back when I was younger, maybe 17, I got my first job at Domino's Pizza. One of my managers was a really scummy 24-year-old guy that looked like a troll, had astoundingly bad hygiene, and also a shitty attitude, but sold good weed and bought me cigarettes. This was my first experience having older friends able to get me good stuff on demand like that. One day he hooked me up with a friend of his that was selling mushrooms, so I met with that guy and bought an ounce, and then walked to my manager's house to sell him some and also get some weed. So turns out him and his similarly aged sister, who has a 1-year-old baby, both live in makeshift bedsheet bedrooms in the basement of the tiny house. They smoked inside, windows closed, cats everywhere, bugs everywhere, weird gross sour smells coming from all areas. Everything gross. Their mom was home, but she was senile and addicted to painkillers, as well as the sister. So we did the trade downstairs, and when I go back upstairs I go to the kitchen to throw some stuff away, and I see the baby in a high chair, eating a pack of cigarettes. He's just sitting there tearing them open and putting in his mouth and spitting it out. I ran downstairs and told the sister and she just started yelling, "Mom, Mom, get the baby," a couple times lazily, then gives up and goes back to just sitting there. It was surreal. I hadn't ever experienced such neglect and disgust from people. I left and waited 2 days to call CPS because I didn't want my manager to know it was me who called. I know the kids got taken away and she went to live with a different family member, or at least that's what I was told. I used to sell weed, X, and K around 20 years back, and I had a regular that would come to see me like clockwork every weekend. He seemed like an okay guy, excluding the drugs of course, but I can't really criticize here because I was a dealer, and after a while his pickups turned into 5-minute chats and then to 30-minute stays during a convo. He let slip that he had a son, a toddler, and that he looked after him every weekend, and that when he was at my joint picking up his kid was in the car, the kid was in the back seat. He had a high-ace minivan windowless the whole time. And not only that, but because he didn't want to share his single bed with his kid and risk getting it urinated in, he made his kid sleep in the van outside. But it's okay. because it was locked and parked in the backyard, so the kid was safe. As soon as he let it slip, he was done as a customer. I told him to go and never come back on the threat of a severe beating. He threatened to rat me to the cops. I told him that my suppliers saw me as a decent source of income and wouldn't take it very well. He left. It rocked me so hard I felt almost concussed. I honestly couldn't process how sterile and casual he was about it all. And I knew I had to tell CPS. So I called anonymously and said I lived on his street and could hear the kid crying from the van at night every weekend, and that I had seen him incoherent and smelling of weed during the day. I never saw him again, and I don't know what happened to either him or his son, but it has stuck with me all this time and I feel responsible for his actions, in part because he did these things in pursuit of his drugs. I eventually stopped dealing and got my sheet together, and the way I felt about this, and the realization that my actions affected people far further from me than I, though, was a huge part of it. Nothing changes the fact that I contributed to that child's neglect and abuse, though, willingly or not. It makes no difference, and it's only one of the shitty ugly things I've done that I have to live with. Reddit. I'm overwhelmed. I never expected this much support, much less any, for simply answering a question and expressing my regrets over a poor life decision. Gildings, DM'(s) of caring support and an inbox full of positivity have made me feel humble. Please forgive me if I don't answer your questions. My heart is heavy with memories and I have to shake it off as I'm due to pick my boys up from school. I used to deal way back when I was a hot mess in an extremely abusive relationship. I called CPS on not only one person, but 6. The one that sticks with me most, though, not only because of the severity, but because I called twice, was this couple who used to pick up from me at a laundromat, and we ended up seeing each other often enough I felt okay to go to their place. I was so fucking floored when I stepped through that door. I kid you not, they had taken up all the carpeting in the house and had torn down the walls to get at the copper wiring and pipes. They had no electricity or running water. There was nothing in that house except for some sleeping bags in what used to be the living room. And then I noticed a nest of blankets with bright blue eyes peering at me over the pile, and realized that there was a toddler and a small child no more than 5. Until this point, I had never seen nor heard them talk about having kids. The poor kids were filthy and obviously malnourished. The house stunk of meth so badly I gagged. I couldn't believe it. I guess the look of shock was super apparent on my face because the dad said they were squatting and introduced me to their kids. I made some small talk and then left. The phone was ringing for CPS before I closed my car door. I gave them the address and let them know the conditions of the home, and they were squatting with 2 small children. Gave the names of the parents as I knew them, and the names of the kids. They ended up going to jail for the squatting and the kids went to live with a relative. They ended up contacting me back to sell to them after they were bailed out of jail, and I never responded. However, the guy I was with at the time ended up selling to them, and they were living in a field in a tent with the kids. I got into a huge fight with my boyfriend over it and was so disgusted he still sold to them. I ended up calling CPS on them again. From what I heard from other people that knew them, the kids were taken permanently after that, and about a year later the mom ended up going to prison for attempted murder and the dad went to prison for check fraud some weeks after that. Edit. I should have mentioned that I sold weed, shrooms, X, and acid. This is a sad story, but I'll tell it anyways, because it was the past. There have been so many stories, but this one takes the cake. It's the reason I stopped selling and turned my life around. I must have been 16 or 17 at the time. I was in high school, also had a part-time job at Dairy Queen, and on top school and regular job, I was selling crack and heroin. I was also selling weed and cigarettes at school. This story involves a heroin and crack user. At the time of this incident, I've already been selling hard for about 1 or 2 years. Profit was pretty good, I'd say around $300 per day on average, which was great for my age, but I spent money as fast as it came. I was young, and I was dumb. So as a DD selling rock, crack, and pants, heroin, I would use some addict's house to sell out of. I guess the cops would call these things crack shacks or projects. I'd be supplying the addict a cheaper price for product, so that I could use their house to sell out of. They would also refer a lot of other people to buy from me, and or they would help sell for me in return for product. So the incident is in this addict's house. He, about 50-year-old man, has a girlfriend slash partner or something like that. The girlfriend had a little boy, maybe the age of 3/4/5. At the time I didn't know how to tell how old a kid was. I didn't ask either, because I was ashamed of myself for not preventing his mother from using. This kid though, I felt like he was my little brother in some way. I would cook for him when he was hungry and his mom was always too messed up to do anything. One day, I go to work at the shack. It was a regular day. I get into the house, get my products ready, weigh out the stuff and bag them up. Knock on the bedroom door of the guy, homeowner. I see him sleeping. His girlfriend is also on the couch sleeping, because she is always high and messed up. The kid is just sitting there watching TV. I make him some macaroni and cheese. Now I gotta wake up the guy, because I need an update on what products he's moved the day before. So I go in his room. I see his eyes were still open. White foam all over him like has overdosed. It's normal for me to see overdoses, but this was beyond an overdose. He's been overdosed for too long, which means he's dead. He was probably overdosed for at least 10 hours, because I could smell it, and he was cold to the touch. His vomit was dried, and his eyes were dried. Now I'm in one of the biggest panics I've ever been in. As I'm trying to figure out what to do, I sit down with the kid and stay there until he finishes his mac and cheese, thinking about what I'm going to do next. His mom, sleeping behind me on the couch, is still alive, but has no idea what had happened. Or maybe she does. I don't know. I left the shack, drove about 2 blocks away, used the prepaid cell phone. I have to call the police and report it. Sat in my car until the police showed up. From that day on, I'm anti-hard drugs. I still wonder about the little kid. He's probably 16 now without a mom. Every time I see the mac and cheese at the supermarket, I get this faked up feeling in my gut. And for the guy that died, I know I didn't kill him. I've accepted that. But could he have lived longer if I was never in his life? His life story was pretty amazing. He did cool things when he was young. He got into drugs when his mom passed away. He didn't have a dad though. One tip for anyone reading this: never judge a person on where they are in life, even if they are crackheads, as many people would say. Some people go through the most brutal situations and have no love and support to get on their feet. I'm glad I was able to be the man's friend before he died, and I know I treated the kid as a big brother slash father, and I hope he remembers that part. I did many years ago. When I pushed, I did not deal in hard drugs, only THC, MDMA, psychedelics, while I was at this woman's house, because she was not only a client, but also a girlfriend of one of my best friends. So I was there often enough to see him. I consistently found myself and anyone else at the house left alone with the child. It seemed if anyone showed up, she would sneak out. Come to find out, she was doing methadone with the upstairs neighbors, and who the hell knows what else. I hate to know who that child was ever left alone with. She had been an on again off again drug addict. Pills, heroin, meth, etc. Many times I witnessed that she would watch her toddler put cigarettes in her mouth from the ground, which I would take away from the baby, and she would laugh and say that it's not a big deal. I rode in her car a few times. I was a smoker at that time as well as her. I would get out of the car to light up, and she would tell me that I could smoke in the car, but I refused because of the child in the back seat. When I was around, I would try my best to kind of steer her away from the child when she wanted to have a cigarette. It is something very specific that began to steer me clear of any tobacco use. She had a bug problem in her house, and she would spray bug killer on every single one of her daughter's toys to keep the bugs off of them. I explained to her that her baby chews on her toys and bug killer can seriously harm her, and she again told me that it's not a big deal. She has seen her baby put worse things in her mouth, and that it will toughen her up. I had enough. I'm the oldest of 9 kids, and I nannied for several families for over a decade aside from mothering my own siblings. I know that a child can handle a lot, but there are so many things that she was doing that kept ringing off the danger bells in my head. I knew that if that child got sick or even died because of her carelessness, I would feel directly responsible for not doing anything about it. If you see something Say something, especially when it involves a child. My goal was not to have her child taken from her, and she never did, but for someone with authority to keep tabs on the child. I could not stand to be around her anymore, and it is within my nature to take on a caretaker role, but that relationship I had with those people was seriously damaging my mental state. I had nothing but fear and sorrow for that little girl. I lost a best friend by doing this, but the kid was worth more than a friend who could not see what his woman doing right in front of him. Point where they are now is even more sad, but I can't bring myself to dive into that. I had a dealer who I thought was alright at first. Came on a little strong asking to play Destiny with me as we both had PS4. Eventually I started going round to his house for a joint, before going home with my bag. This was fine at first but gradually became a bit of a living hell. He started screaming at his kids. They must have been 3 and 6. For anything. For walking into the room. For playing in another room. For making a loud noise. For asking a question. Even when 3 want a hug he's shouting at them, and even when he gave one he told them to stop being stupid and stop crying. This abuse extended to his partner. She was half his size and thin as hell. Not unhealthy thin but thin. It was just verbal, but calling her an idiot, screaming at her, and the slow angry tone he took with his kids, talking through his teeth then exploding at the end of the sentence. She hated it, you could tell, but she put up with it cause she didn't work and needed to support the kids who she loved. One day he got so mad he held her against the wall and started choking her. I stood up and shouted, "What the fuck are you doing?" He caught himself and backed away. She slumped to the floor crying, and he tried a pathetic attempt at damage control, telling her he's sorry, but it's her fault, and telling me the same. I left there and then never went back. Called social services and gave them the address. I knew they had been before, but they won't have seen it happening. Not too long after the police were there arresting him for something. I assumed that SS saw the weed or something and called them, but I'm glad they did. I feel like I should have done something sooner as the red flags began to raise, but there were unfortunately 2 things holding me back. 1. I was the only person that came round for joints, so he would know who called them, and 2. I really wanted bud. I was so bad for it. And I really spiraled knowing I was a slave to the addiction. Ultimately that helped me kick it. Been clean 4 years now. I'm not a dealer, but I called CPS on my sister. She smoked a lot of pot, not a huge deal, but one day, when I was picking them up to come to my house, she was on the floor smoking a bowl with him right next to her. She also told my husband there was meth in the house and her boyfriend was on acid. They also fought constantly, and I know it got physical. There was a time he threatened her and said if you weren't holding him, I'd beat the shit out of you. She always complained that he never slept, but the first night he was at my house he fell asleep with no issue and did perfectly all week long. For the first 17 weeks of her pregnancy she was high and told the doctor so. So it's frustrating that she got past that point. She called me one day because they had been by the do a wellness check. So I went to pick the baby up, 8mo old. The house was fucking disgusting. I had never seen anything like it. There were piles of trash bags filled with diapers and rotting food. Counters were covered. The floors when I sat down felt nasty. The baby was in only a diaper, normal for his age, but all of his clothes were dirty. She packed a bag for him to stay the night with me. He had multiple patches of ringworm, one the size of a quarter, and his bag, clothes, and car seat were filled with cockroaches. My husband swears up and down he found bed bugs in the baby's car seat. We threw the car seat away and washed all of his clothes and then went and bought him a new car seat, bought one for my house and new one for her. We had the baby for a week and CPS never showed back up, so she asked for him back. We didn't have any signed statement saying she gave us permission to take him, so we were worried if we said no she'd try and get us for kidnapping, so we gave him back. We took her to Walmart to buy soap, her car seat, and meds for the ringworm. The next day I called CPS and filed as a mandated reporter and told them everything I knew. It's been 3 weeks and nothing has come out of it. I talked to my sister a little while ago and asked about the ringworm. She said it's still there and that the doctors say there's nothing they can do, which I know is bullshit. It broke my heart to call, but I had to. It kills me knowing he's in that house and I feel helpless. There's nothing else I can do. It's hard enough. My husband and I have our own 5-month-old baby, but I would take that little boy in a heartbeat, because at least I know he'd be in a clean, safe house with people to take care of him. He doesn't deserve that. Edit. I just want to thank everyone for their support in this. It's one of the harder things I've gone through with my husband, and he has been so supportive and understanding. He's all for taking the baby if we get the chance. We are stressed out with life in general, and a new baby, plus trying to do everything we can to make sure my sister's baby is safe. Sometimes I sit back and remind myself how that baby's life is, and that no matter what I can't give up on him. Yes, we have called CPS multiple times, as well as the cops. I have pictures of the ring woman and a message from her saying the doctors can't do anything. I don't have any pictures of her apartment. I go in very rarely, and after the one wellness check that was done, she's pretty reluctant to let people around. Even when the cops knocked on her door for the check, she refused to let them into the house. I don't know if they saw the baby or not. I don't know how much more I can do if the cops can't even get in. I'm trying my hardest. I seriously am. I feel helpless because with everything I'm doing, nothing seems to be coming out of it. I call for updated every other day on the case and I keep getting told to call back, and I plan to until someone tells me to go get the baby. Everyone who has seen or heard has made a report. I've offered to help her get away from her boyfriend and even let her and the baby move in with us, but she refuses to leave him. I've asked her to let me keep the baby, but the longest we did was a week, and she demanded we gave him back. She doesn't work, neither does the boyfriend. They live in government housing. The baby doesn't go to daycare, and she doesn't have health insurance as far as I know. I didn't know what else to do. I don't have too much knowledge other than my own experiences, and I have never dealt with something like this before, neither has my husband. It is so hard, and you have no idea how helpful a few stranger support is to me. So thank you guys so much. Update for those who ask, I don't know, to be honest. She's told me she moved to Utah and doesn't post anything on Facebook anymore, so I have no idea, unfortunately. I appreciate everyone who has been checking in. I wish I had better news. I used to work at a chain restaurant about 4 years ago when I was around 21. There was a girl who started after me, call her Ashley. Ashley and I became best friends almost immediately. She was almost 10 years older than me at the time, but you could not tell, especially by the way she acted. But at 21, that didn't really much matter to me. We used to sneak nips into work, leave work to get drunk, and try to sneak back, drank together out of work all the time. I knew she had a son that lived on the other side of the country that the father had custody of. She gave me some story about him lying, saying she was crazy and getting her child taken away, and nothing she did could get him back because her ex was manipulative. I bought it. Eventually I found a better job, and that's about where our hanging out friendship ended. We always stayed in touch on FB. I got pregnant with my son around 23, and she had had 2 daughters in that time. So we agreed to get together and let each other meet our kids. I get to her house, and I see her walking up the street towards the house without her girls. The oldest was 2, I believe, waving to me. I get out with my son and I ask her, "Where are your daughters?" "Oh, they're inside," she says. She left her baby daughters home alone, locked inside her bedroom, to walk a mile up the road to get cigs. Okay, faked up. But I went inside anyway, kept my son in his car seat next to me on the couch. I can tell she's absolutely wasted already, but she pours herself 2 root beer Smirnoff nips into a cup, lets the daughters out of the room and turns the TV on for them. The house was clean. That is what really threw me off. Like, it looked like a great environment. She sits next to me on the couch and places her cup in the drink holder attached to the couch, and we just start catching up. About 10 minutes later, her daughter says she's hungry. Ashley yells, "I just faking fed you. Watch your trolls." I was stunned. Then the little girl climbs up on the couch and grabs the cup of vodka. I say, "No honey, that's not for babies." But Ashley stops me and says, "Oh, it's fine, it will probably help her sleep better tonight," and lets her 2-year-old daughter take a sip of her 100 proof alcohol. Now I'm about to leave, getting my shoes on, and her husband comes in, who I also knew from the same restaurant where he still worked at that time. He flips. He says, "Ashley, have these girls eaten anything all day?" She said yes, she gave them grapes and cottage cheese. It was 7 p.m. She had given her daughters only a few grapes and a bowl of cottage cheese all day. I was done. I called as soon as I got in my car. The father has custody of them now, I believe. He moved out of state somewhere. Thank God, because who knows how they would have ended up. Edit. I messed up words and adding some spacing for easier reading. So made a throwaway and first time posting in here, but have been needing to tell someone I don't know if what I did was right. So all I sell is weed, coke every now and then, but hate the clients, so just weed mostly. Was introduced to this girl that did the same thing. We would usually meet up and do business together. We are kinda around the same level, so sometimes I dropped off, sometimes I grabbed. I noticed she liked me, but kinda ignored it. Don't cheat where you eat, kinda sheet. So times goes by, I find out she has kids that are now living with her in the house. Before they were at their dad's or somewhere, I don't know, didn't really care. So when I go over now, there are kids that really start to freak me out because I know it's weed, but still I don't feel they should be exposed to it. Ask her, hey, you want to meet up elsewhere or maybe come to my place? Says no, her house is cool. Don't want to, but I'm as hole on money. So one day I show up, there are a shit ton of people around, to kids 1915 playing video games, and like 3 guys and 2 girls just blazing like there is no tomorrow. Walking nervous cause I don't like doing this with so many people around. Tells me it's cool, notice a gun on the kitchen table, and here we go. To my surprise everything goes fine. I'm about to leave, but ask her to talk to me outside. I tell her that I don't think she should be doing this around her kids, and if she does, maybe separate the kids in a different room. She tells me her kids have been around this there all their lives and they know how to act and what not to touch and what not to say. All I can think to myself is they are faking kids, they don't know shit but what we teach them. But whatever, said my part. Go back a couple times, see the youngest eat next to a gun and pound of weed, the oldest play videos next to a loaded gun, everyone is smoking around them cigarettes, weed. The last straw is I go over and she is freaking out, tell her to calm down, said her kid ate one of her friend's edibles, a 5-year-old ate a cookie from a dispensary. I flip out, tell her to make him throw up and let's take him to the hospital. She tells me no, they will take them from her. Ask her how the fuck she let this happen. Tells me she told her friend not to leave the cookie around, but they didn't listen. I helped them force this 5-year-old throw up, gave him orange juice cause they said it helped the high come down. I left feeling like the worst kinda person there is. Normally I don't think of myself as a bad person for selling weed, I mean it's weed, but that day fuck. To finish, I don't think she is a bad mom by that I mean I think she tries, but fuck, how many mess ups can you get? A month passed, and for some reason I keep thinking of her kids to the point where I called CPS and told them what happened. I left the dealing part out for both of us, and the guns I really don't know if they would be better in child services or with her. I have family that used to be in homes, and fuck, it's horrible, but what's worse, I don't know. I don't know if I made the right choice. In my younger stupider days I dealt meth. Meth is a strange force, we'll start there. I, of course, was also a huge junkie and just trying to fuel my need. But there was this one house I would go to all the time. Mom and dad just fully in the throes of addiction, but they had 2 sweet little girls there. During the time I was dealing, I got pregnant and stopped using, but I continued to deal because it's the only way I could save up money for my new baby. I ended up staying at this house, sleeping on the couch. Day in and day out, there were junkies coming in, fights breaking out, guns drawn. These 2 girls saw every bit of it. Eventually, the water was shut off, the gas was shut off, we were burning old furniture in the fireplace for heat. We were dumping water in the toilet to flush. This was normal for these girls. As I woke up from my drug-induced stupor, I looked at these sweet girls, just victims in this hellhole. They bathed in water boiled over a fire and cooled enough to get in. Heard their parents fight over dope. Heard worse at night. I started to have a routine with them, just to shelter them from their everyday horror. I did their homework with them, walked them to the park, made dinner for them, gave them baths, and brushed their hair, put them to bed with a story. I remember staying up with them while they were sick, rubbing their backs as they threw up and cried. They screamed and cried as I moved out. My heart was broken. When I left that house, I thought of the life they would go back to. I had my own baby, to take care of now, and I couldn't imagine her in that mess. I called CPS the first day in my new house. They were taken to their grandparents. I've never touched drugs since those days. It was enough to show me that true evil exists. I think of those girls a lot. I hope their life is good. They kept me clean when it was hard to be. They showed me what I wanted to be like as a mom. They played a role in saving my life. In high school, I remember my friend put me on, and I started pushing part-time. There was a client who frequently picked up Molly and weed. She never gave us trouble and was always good on payment point. She never asked for heroin or coke, so I figured she probably just recreationally smoked and rolled at parties. I say no problem, swing by her place. Imagine my surprise when I get there and she lets me in asking if I want a line. I politely refuse, taking a look around at how filthy the place was. There were cigarette burns and butts all over the place, cockroaches ran rampant, and needles strewn around the table. It was gross. I could barely breathe due to the smell of pee and feces. Double my surprise when a toddler just waddles in and the child looks dirty, malnourished, and hungry. I ask her whose kid that is, and she gives me a strange look saying that's hers. Turns out that she got kicked out by her mother for being pregnant and ended up living by herself. Later on, she tells me her mother had deep regrets for her dismissal and offered to take her back and help raise the baby. Unfortunately, for some odd reason she refused her mother's assistance and foolishly decided to do things on her own. I have no clue how she afforded her drug habits. I would take an educated guess that she would sell her body to reach that goal. I remember telling a close friend of mine that was a few years older than me what happened, and she got in touch with CPS. Cops came, she was arrested, and the mother took custody of the child. I don't know what happened to her after that, but I hope she has sobered up and the child is okay. I'll never forget the last fleeting image I had of the woman. Right before I left, she was wrapping up her arm to inject herself with heroin. I went to this disabled woman's house to bring the goods. It had been a while since I had seen her. I think her son was 13 the last time I had been there, and now he was 15. I asked her how he was doing. She began telling me he had been giving her a lot of trouble, and I couldn't imagine that cause he was such a good kid. I wish I could explain the no big deal tone she had when she told me this. Kid's name said he has had enough and that he was going to kill himself. He went to the bathroom and got a razor blade and cut his bicep down to the bone. I begged him to let me take him to the ER, but he wouldn't. Ungrateful sheet. I know she saw the look of horror on my face. I told her I wanted to go say and went to talk with him. He told me she had a new boyfriend and all they do is drink, shoot up, and fight. He said he wanted to live with his dad, but he had a new family. I told him about telling someone at school about it, and he didn't want his mom to be in trouble. As an adult, my dad had put me on 72-hour holds in the crazy house several times. I told him how a 72-hour hold could give him time to think about what to do next, have 3 meals a day, and someone to talk to. I know that's not great advice, but I was still using at the time and wasn't my best self. The good intention was there, though. I ended up getting in a fight with her before I left. My son was a little younger than hers, and I couldn't imagine telling that story the way she did. I waited a week and called CPS, hoping she wouldn't know it was me. She did. Nothing ever came of it, and I still think about that boy all the time. This was a long time ago, but yes, I lived that typical urban trope and grew up in a very bad neighborhood growing up. As teens, the drug game was just something that you were into, since everyone sold. But I was around 17, late 90s, and had been serving this one super fiend we all called Baby Twerk. She had a dude and she'd take his money, his car, and would trick on the side for cash, and would literally page us every 2 to 3 hours around the clock. She was loyal, and we used to dime her to death. A rule we typically adhered to is that you never go to a head's house or domicile, as it's usually being watched by the PO9, or you could be tried by your customer, which would force you to react. But this one particular Saturday night, my friend and I were sitting around playing N64 and wanted to buy another rumble pack for the second controller when Baby Twerk hit us up. It was storming very bad outside, and she had her kids and couldn't walk to the gas station to meet. So we decided to do what we said we wouldn't and pulled up to her house. Mind you, this was back when pagers and payphones were a thing, so there was no "I'm here" texts point anyway. We waited and waited, but she didn't come outside. As most know, most houses in the hood don't have gutters or porches, so when you pull up in a lightning storm, you either get absolutely dumped on, or you go inside. Bruh, we walked in, and it was just as we pictured. She had 5 kids, the oldest being like 7, but there was trash, no carpet and a hole in the middle of the kitchen floor from which you could see the crawl space. There were 2 other dudes we regularly served in the house also. We could hear the sound of someone a room away trying to light up as her 4-year-old walked up to my friend and asked to go by. All of a sudden old boy walked around the corner and we hear the unmistakable sound of sizzling bass approaching. We had a thing about smelling crack and being within 50 feet of it, as that was a selling charge of police happened to pull up, so we did a 180, ran out stumbling over each other, comically fast, and bounced. We had to wait until that Monday, but the look on her daughter's face stuck with us all weekend and faked us up. It made us rethink what we were doing. But CPS got involved. They took the kids, put them with family, thankfully, and arrested her. But after that and all the dust settled, we continued serving baby twerk and ended up getting our second rumble pack, guilt-free. I guess I'm not a dealer, per se. I happen to have a lot of connections, and as such, I middleman for folks fairly often. I have a fee for my services, obviously. Over a ½ ounce of weed is still a felony in my state, so I'm not picking up and delivering different substances for free. Also, my truck gets 10-ish miles to the gallon. I can't afford to drive around picking up and dropping off things of that nature without some compensation. I digress. Had a guy ask me if I could get acid. I hit up a few people and we went through the dance of figuring out how much he wanted, how much I was going to get paid, where and when we were meeting, etc. So, I went and got the guy a 10 strip for like $100, and he said he'd give me $125 to bring it to his house. Cool, worth it. I show up, and he lets me in. Apartment is clean. He and his girlfriend are just chilling on the couch. I give him his tabs and get my money and ask him if I can use his bathroom. He says no prob and tells me where it is. I get in the bathroom and start doing my business. Nothing feels better than taking a huge piss after driving for forever, I swear. I wish they could put that feeling in a drug. Anyway, I'm finishing up and I hear a baby start crying. I didn't think a ton of it until I hear the dude start screaming at the baby to shut the fuck up. The guy's girlfriend starts screaming at him and the baby just sounds terrified. Some of the most horrible sounds I've ever heard a child make. They scream for a second, and I'm debating on what to do when I hear a thud, and the girlfriend starts screaming and crying. I decide I've got to do something, and I walk out and into the living room. He's standing over her with his fist, balled up and screaming. She's clutching the left side of her face crying, and the baby is still in some other room going faking nuts. I yell, "Hey, dude, what the fuck?" at the guy, and he turns around and tells me I should go. He looked faking evil. In that moment, I'd have shot him if I could done so with no repercussions, but I thought better of it. So I left. I went outside, made an anonymous 911 call on my burner, and said I was a concerned neighbor. Told them they needed to hurry because someone's life was in danger, gave them the address, and hung up. I pulled out of the complex and down the street a bit. Saw 2 cars with blue lights going use their sirens to beep through the complex's gate. I have no idea what wound up happening, but I hope that girl and baby are okay. I'll never forget what I saw and heard that day. Fuck people like that, dude. August 9th, 1999. We had a person, we will call her Carrie. She would party with us for days on end, I mean doing everything and everyone. One night my homie said we gotta take her home because her sister might call her in as a missing person and we didn't want to have her send the cops over to where we were, Clarking Point. When we got to Dennis Apt we found out for the first time that she had a kid at home. Now let me first tell you, this T-Roy wasn't the kind of dude that would cry. The house was the nastiest thing I had seen. Yeah, it was what's cabot damn. The room the kid was in had no furniture and the door was blocked with plywood about 3 feet high, and the baby girl was left in there crawling on the doo-doo stained floor. The kid was crawling through its own piss and crap like a dog. The place smelled worse than the meth house in the valley we went to. T-Roy was yelling at Carrie, who flopped down drunk on her filthy couch. They didn't have electricity, only an extension cord from next door to power the fridge and a desk lamp. T-Roy, who was not a snitch type, on the way home threw his gun down on the counter at my place and was mad that we didn't just take the kid with us. She rang someone's pager trying to get a fix. She was told she could pick up from us anymore. T-Roy was trying to get someone to call DPSS to pick up the kid. No one wanted to do that. Kerry was blowing up someone's pager cause she was going the withdrawals and all of that. Didn't hear from her till we saw that she had threw her kid out the 6th story window and she jumped out too. They Newton Division called it murder-suicide, but it was something everyone thought about. Very sad. People, take care of your kids. Los Angeles Police Department. Press release Wednesday, August 11, 1999. On the 8th of October 1999 at 11:30 p.m., 37-year-old Carolyn Felton threw her 9-month-old daughter, Janaya, from the 6th story window of their apartment building located at the Ford Hotel, 1002 East 7th Street, Los Angeles. The suspect then jumped out of the window herself. Neither the infant nor the suspect survived the fall. At this time, the motive for the murder-suicide is unknown. I was delivering large amounts of pot at 16 to 18. Had met a new client referred to me by a friend. At the time, I always made it a point to come inside and scale out. I hate parking lot meets, they're unnecessary. This guy insisted on meeting in his apartment parking lot every time. I let it slide because he would purchase at least a £1/4 every time. In hindsight, that was dumb. The 5th or 6th time we meet, he finally invites me in. He had 2 boys, 1 infant, and 1 toddler no more than 4 years old. There was a woman strung out at 2 p.m. on the couch. Couple boxes of nasal Narcan next to some cookers on a coffee table. One of the boxes was opened. Each of those boxes have 2 doses. One had already been used. The toddler was just running around the 500, 600 SQFD apartment playing, and the guy would threaten him to settle down. There were nothing but stacked boxes in a couple corners, an air mattress for the toddler, a crib in another corner, a couch, coffee table, and a foldable chair. Carpet had massive charred/burned areas. The guy catches my glances and tells me, irritatedly, "It's fine. They're familiar with all of this. Just scale the bud." I asked him, "You sure?" He looked at me like I was a dumbass. So I scaled his bud. Meanwhile, his kid started acting up again, and he said sternly, "I swear to God." He settled down immediately with a look of shameful terror. I understand that being a parent, it's difficult to make ends meet. I didn't want to interfere with his life. It wasn't my place. But when I left, I closed the door and immediately heard from the other side, "Next time if you don't stay in your room when I have company, I'll break your smackhead mother's faking face. You hear me?" I got in my car, parked down the street, and called the Texas Abuse Hotline. I don't know what happened to any of them after that. Haven't thought about that for years. I just hope that they're all doing better. I hope I didn't just ruin several people's lives. Probably about a decade ago now, I used to sell weed to this one couple in town. They seemed like decent enough people until I found out woman was pregnant and still getting high, not even just on weed, but doing psychedelics and pills. I stopped faking with them for a long time, and one day get a call. She just had the baby and said she was having a party to celebrate. She was going to have acid, shrooms, weed, and alcohol. I was like, "You got a babysitter?" To which she said, "Nah, we are just gonna leave her in the room." There was going to be like 40 people all faked up and tripping while she just locked her newborn in the room. Needless to say, I'm like mentally faking screaming at this point, but keep my composure. I'm like, "You already got everything?" "No, I was gonna see if I could have you friend me some weed. I already got everything else." "Bet." "What time?" She tells me the time, and I hang up. Told my wife about it and asked her what to do cause that's faked. We called size and told them what time the party was supposed to be and what their plan was. Turned out by the time they got there the couple was already passed out. There was way more people and hard drugs as well. People were nodded out in the baby's room. Last I heard the couple lost the baby and never got it back. They are both pretty hard on heroin, which I think they started faking with during the time I stopped coming around, while she was still pregnant. Edit. Fixed typo. I wasn't a drug dealer, but a user back in the day, clean for 10 plus years now. Quit as soon as I got pregnant with my oldest, but I went to the person's house with a couple friends, and when they answered the door, the girl was dressed in a cheap maid's lingerie outfit, like 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and the other girl wasn't much better. They had 4 or 5 kids in the house that I saw upon entering. They were probably 3 to 8 years old and filthy. Just, damn it. They screamed at the kids to go play in the room and we all sat in the living room. I was ready to leave at this point. My friend was selling them some weed, so he was dealing with that. I heard crying coming from the back room, newborn crying, and everyone ignored it for a good 10 minutes until my friend told the woman to go get her damn baby. So she comes out with this 2-month-old who is filthy, in a dirty diaper, and I think she made him a bottle, but I'm not even sure. She held him for like 5 minutes, and then went and put him back in the back room where he cried continuously. It was seriously heartbreaking. The guy I was with started berating her for not dealing with her kid and we left. I made a report right after that. Between the neglect of the newborn and older kids, state of the house, and physically watching these moms not give to sheets, it was too much. Turns out that baby died shortly after from neglect and supposed abuse. It still makes my stomach hurt even today. I still follow her trashy ass on social media because she's a mess. She's had her other kids taken away and given back. She constantly posts about everybody being against her and the world being racist because she's American Indian and her husband is no better. They're constantly trying to get the state in trouble or businesses for faking them over, like epitome of trash people. Mine is actually reverse. By a calling on dealer. This was about a decade ago, and I was addicted very badly to opiates, mainly heroin. I used to buy from this woman who had really good shit at very low cost. I bought from her for about a year and literally watched her transform from a semi-habitual user to a full-blown junkhead. Right before I called on her, she got robbed and was trying to make up her money by selling macupe that looked like dope. It's a good thing I had the common sense to not try it. God only knows what would have happened if I shot that point anyway. After that I got super pissed and went to her house. She used to always meet me in the backyard, so I never went in before. Well, when I barged in I found she had a toddler. Never made any mention of a kid. This kid looked like he had been rolling around in dirt for the last 3 months without ever taking a shower. Looked like he hadn't eaten in a month. The house was filthy, stains everywhere, torn up, disgusting, clothes all over the place, a rank smell coming from the kitchen etc. It was literally like that episode of Breaking Bad where Jess goes to the meth head's house to get his money back and finds the kid. I saw the kid, saw the house, and walked right out to call CPS. Somehow he ended back up with her after a few weeks. But a month or so after that she was caught with some guy she knew using counterfeit money all over town. Feds raided the place. She got a nice long sentence and the kid lives with a relative. From what I heard, as bad of an addict as I was. I truly don't understand how anyone could be so bad as to not only live like that, but to neglect an innocent child so badly. My younger sister and I were raised around some drugs and violence as my parents were users and small-time hustlers. After a divorce, when we were 15 and 13, and we started smoking pot with our parents, my sister started getting into harder drugs, whereas I stuck to weed and shrooms. Eventually she had a baby at 18, and started getting arrested for stealing, by hiding stuff in her daughter's stroller etc. I was living in California at the time, but I came back to work for the summer. I was working hard and hustling here and there when I started to hear some rumors about my sister's boyfriend/dealer. They were shacked up a few doors down from my mom's apt. I knew there was other stuff going on there than just weed. Texas has a weird scene because everything is illegal. One day my sister was arguing with my mother and my mother called me and asked me to come help her because my sister had friends cussing her out. I could hear the baby crying, maybe 10 months old at the time. I was drinking at a bar around the corner, so I was a little buzzed. I ran through the woods to get there within 5 minutes. I came beating on the door like SWAT. They came out all scared, and I saw my niece on the ground of their apt with a plate of weed next to her and cigarette smoke in the air. I screamed at them so damn loud that people started coming out of their apt. I let them have it, telling them how much they don't matter and how they are useless existing. They threatened to call the cops on me because they knew I had an and a knife on me at all times. I said fuck it and called them myself on speakerphone. I stood outside till the sheriff department showed up and gave them my side of the story. They let my sister take my niece somewhere else, and that was that. Days later, after doing some legal research, I hired a lawyer for my father to get custody of my niece. It cost a lot of money and made my sister really depressed more than she is, but the baby just turned 7 and is having a great life. My sister still is addicted to drugs and is about one step away from HIV, homelessness, or OD. I only use personally and steer clear of all business now. My sister still makes plans to see her daughter and never shows up. Back when I was fresh out of high school, I knew the drug circuit in and around my school and home area like the back of my hand, inside of my pocket, and my wallet combined. I sold Ritalin, painkillers, and alcohol. I know that last one technically doesn't count, but whatever, among other things. Sometimes if I could get my hands on a good batch from one of the bigger fish. I knew who did what, and I knew which places to avoid so nobody mugged you or tried to bullshit you into a bad deal. I also knew exactly which dealers were cutting their stuff and which kids were buying the drugs. I probably should have dismantled the whole thing, or most of it, but most people knew that I knew, so it would have been highly dangerous to do so. I'm no longer involved in this kind of stuff, but I still have feelers out to make sure no more dealers make moves near my home. One day, I find out that one of the more, let's say shady, drug dealers I knew was starting to peddle to kids. And I mean kids, like 10 to 12-year-olds. Given that the school was a very wealthy one, with the kids going there easily getting allowances of several tens of euros a day, it was easy pickings. The problem was that the guy who was selling the drugs was himself only like 17 at most, and was selling drugs his dad was buying for himself. The dad was loaded, drove a tuned up Mercedes, and a souped up BMW. Yet, even being an only child, coming from a well-off family, I assume, both his mom and dad had their own cars, plural, and expensive ones at that. So, to put an end to the little kids getting addicted, I may have been a dealer, but I still had standards. I decided to get a beat on his dad. The dad bought his drugs from one of the bigger dealers in a hidden area near one of the bigger parks, out of sight unless you knew exactly which bushes hid, that one little nook next to a building. I knew what he bought, so the next day, I approached the bigger dealer for a small cut of his stuff. He sold me about 10 grams of cocaine and a 15-gram bag of premium weed. The following weeks, I shadowed the dad every time he went out to buy. One day, I managed to catch his eye, and as he came up, I turned my phone on to record. The conversation went something like this. Hey, I haven't seen you around here before. You knew me. I usually work a few blocks from here. It's relaxing to be here from time to time, though a few blocks away was nearest to the school and Closeby Mall. Prime dealing territory, if you knew how to stay out of sight. Oh, anything interesting happen in your day? I don't know whether he was feeling out or already on board. Me, oh, yeah, sure. Saw the sunrise when I woke up this morning. The cocaine I was selling was called White Sunrise, so I was trying to coat him in. From there, we made a transaction for about half of what I spent to actually get the drugs, so I could really hit home the deal. He left, and I waited about a week before I left an anonymous tip about somebody stashing a bag of white powder into a trash can near his house. I dumped the remainder of my stash there because I was getting out, and that the man looked like description of dad. A week later, the other dealer is out of school, and his dad got arrested for possession and child endangerment. Never heard what happened to the kids, but I'd cleaned up a child dealer, and that's all I really wanted at the time. I'm not proud of some of the decisions I made in life, but walking away from dealing and cleaning up the school a bit was one of my prouder memories. When I was a young teenager, my best friend, at the time, had an older sister who sold crack cocaine. She'd give us rides to places in her car, and sometimes would make a drop off, or meet someone along the way. Wasn't too keen on being in the vehicle during these times, but she was kind of a crazy beach, and had a bad temper, so we never questioned her or said anything, and plus we were just young and kinda dumb. I remember one lady she'd see often, and this lady was the most stereotypical crack addict. Skinny as a rake, jittery, twitchy, insane. She spent all day with other heads in random sketchy areas of the city or crack houses. One time friend's older sister pulled up to meet her, and she was hanging out under a bridge with a bunch of other crazes, and there was a big garbage bin on fire that they were hanging out around cause it was winter and freezing out. She came up to the window and a young boy followed her. He must have been 9 or 10. He looked pale and thin, bags under his eyes, and not wearing proper winter clothes. He didn't say anything, but the lady started rambling about how the only time he gets excited or happy is when he knows Vicky is coming. Vicky was my friend's sister's alias. The lady went on about how he loves Vicky and says she's so pretty and wants to be like her and have a vehicle like hers and all this. Vicky literally said nothing, just handed her the stuff, got the money which included a coffee can full of coins, and drove off. My friend asked her sister who the little boy was, and she coldly just said he was the woman's kid. My friend has a good conscience and is not like her sister at all. I remember her looking back at me from the front seat with a horrified look on her face when she heard that poor kid was the crackhead's son and he was out there hanging out with all these druggies while they were high out of their tree. Older C's also mentioned that the kid spends all day picking up cigarette butts cause he was addicted to smoking. Me and my friend talked about it later, and how it bothered us, and how it was faked up, that her sister gave no facts about it, but such is usually the attitude of drug dealers. She cared about money only. My friend said she was going to put in an anonymous tip to police/social services, but didn't want to go personally, or be identified to protect her sister. She did, and we saw the lady a few times again, but didn't see the little boy, but couldn't be sure if he had been taken by CPS or just wasn't around. Imagine a child's biggest excitement being when his mom's drug dealer stops by, who doesn't even acknowledge him. Edit, typus. Back in the early 90s, when I was doing paper drops for the area paper boys, while I worked for the local newspaper, I had a side gig and a few stops in between where I dropped off other things for a mystery employer. Long story, never open the deep freezer at a multi-family fiesta or you might get a mystery employer. The purpose is to incriminate you, so they don't have to kill you for stumbling onto the family secrets. Anyway, one day as I stopped to deliver a bundle to a customer, I could hear someone yelling, "Maybe next time you won't run through the house," and I could hear a child screaming, and then a door slammed, and it got faint. As I got inside, the guy I handed off to tells me, "Look out for the rope, don't trip," and I look down and see a rope stretched across the hallway right before the 4 tiled steps that lead to the tiled kitchen below. And I noticed drops and drizzles of fresh blood, so I asked, knowing it was from the child, but not wanting to call him on it, "Looks like your wife may have missed a step, is she okay?" And he outright says with a proud grin, "That's from the kid's face, he doesn't wanna listen," and keeps running through the house. So I set that rope up right there, and he learned the hard way to listen. He don't respond to the belt or the back of my hand. Shit, my wife about shook him to death the other night. His eyes rolled back, even that don't faze him. At this point I'm well aware that one of the bundles I have in the van is a ceramic firearm with a box of metal-free shells, and I was about to go get it and tie this guy up with that rope bare as, and hand his kid the hot spoon, and put a chair by the stove so the kid can warm it up as needed. But I knew it would be my end too, so I skipped out on a couple bundle drops and headed back to the dispatch office. Pre-cell phone days, mind you. I called the police fully expecting them to ask me what I was doing keeping company with this idiot, and then left to deliver the late newspapers. When I got back, the office out front was lined with police cars and a CPS worker took a statement. I lied and said he flagged me down to ask about paper routes for adults. The child had a fractured skull and several healed fractures in his face and burns and bruises everywhere but arms, legs and face. Turns out the family had a daughter who they reported as a 12-year-old runaway just a year before. I hope that's true, but I have darker suspicions. They went to prison 5 to 20 years. Under multiple weapons, drugs, 25 years federal for possession of stolen military device, and 3 years for child abuse and endangerment. As far as I know, the daughter was never located. Yeah, that's not a misprint. Only 3 years for the kid and 25 for stolen military device. That incident sealed my anarchist ideals permanently, because in an anarchist society these parents would be eliminated or used as examples and put to work building toys for slave wages. I was the kid. One of 3, me and my 2 siblings. We were all under 10 years old at the time. Being vague to protect anonymity, our father was the local kingpin of our small town, which was in driving distance of New York City. Both he and my mother were hopelessly addicted. This went on for a number of years. The ring of those involved grew exponentially over time. The drugs came in bigger quantities. Guns and knives were being purchased en masse and were also being trafficked. Someone called CPS. It was late summer or early fall. Myself and my siblings were starving, did not have clothing, and were not being cared for. Multiple people had tried to step in at this point to take us, and were threatened by violence from my father as well as drug addicts, friends that were squatting on our farmland. The feds set up a bust. Over 20 people were arrested. At the time it was one of the largest drug and weapon busts in the state outside of the city proper. It was nearing Christmas time and there was snow on the ground. I remember my siblings and I watching barefoot as everyone was rounded up from various areas of the property and put into a long line of police vehicles by armed policemen. Sentences handed down were in the double digits in terms of years given. Both of my parents served their time and have been released. I have an amicable relationship with both of them now as an adult. We wound up in the care of our grandparents. We cold bean split into multiple foster homes, but they took us in and spent their entire retirement fund raising us. All 3 of us have now grown up into well-adjusted adults with good jobs and stable living situations. I'm eternally grateful for whoever made the call. Rumor in the family is it was my father's mother, but she refuses to admit it. Whoever it was saved our lives. Thanks for letting me share my story. As a kid who ended up in foster care multiple times because of drug-using parents, my father eventually cleaned up his act and got myself and my sister back. I just want to say thank you to anyone who has gotten a child out of these situations. The conditions some you guys describe are all too real for me, and until high school I never really looked at them as abnormal, really just kind of shitty. I still sometimes mention how I used to bring home crack pipes and condom wrappers as a kid, and it takes me a second to realize why people are looking at me a little weird. To any drug dealers, please stop selling hard drugs to adults with children. I get it, money is money, been there done that, might go back for a bit cause of this corona thing tbh, but just think for a second what nearly irreparable emotional and physical damage will come from letting those parents go back home with their kids. Age 5, my little sister melted a plastic straw on the stove and dropped it on my foot, causing a pretty big blister that I still have a scar from today. Where were my parents? Father was at work and my mother was cracked out on the couch not hearing me crying for 3 hours until my dad came home. Need another example? How about my dad pulling up next to my mother at a red light giving a dude a BJ for a rock with me and my sister in the backseat and the floor covered in dirty diapers? I'm actually getting a little mad now, so I'll stop there, but please just think about the kids for a minimum. This teen mom, which I didn't know at this point was a teen mom, bought weed from me before multiple times. Trough a friend of hers, and one day she asked if could bring it to her house. So I said sure. I went over there, and I heard a baby cry. So I say it's not too good to smoke near your little brother or sister. She then said that's my own son and I wish that he would just disappear. It's an annoying little beach which won't stop crying at this point. I wasn't sure if I should sell her it, but she invites me in, and I see bruises on the baby, his head and arms, and I mean purple bruises, not like small ones, and this pissed me off really bad. So I gave her the weed, then called the police and told them I keep hearing her yell and the baby has been crying for a long time, and I said I walk my dog near her house and that I can hear the baby cry 9 out of 10 times and that I'm really worried. Police and Child Protective Service comes like 10 minutes later, and she got arrested and got child abuse charges and her child was taken to foster care. It also turned out that she was already on watch by Child Protective Services after a hospital visit and doctors saw her baby had bruises. I later found out the baby even had bruises on his neck as well. It's been a few years now, and I don't remember as clear, but it sorta went like that point. This also looks a lot like another comment, and I know that point. Sorry for the bad English, it's not my first language. I sold drugs for a little over a decade, and the last 3 years, before I quit, I was selling heroin and meth. Most my knocks I would meet places, or if I had a hotel room they could come to me, but never let them know where I lived. But I also sold to people I was friends with, and I'd let them come to my house to pick up or hang out. Some of them had kids, and for the most part were decent parents. There were a couple exceptions though, and called CPS once. So I had one friend with 3 kids, a baby and 2 toddlers. Whenever he came over I assumed they were with their mom or something. In reality he left them in his van somewhere on my street, and would be in my place for anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, usually at night. In W neighborhood that was nothing but gangbangers and drug dealers, constant shootings and other shit. My girlfriend who lived with me wouldn't go out by herself at night, and one of my cars got stolen at one point. The next day I was gonna confront him about it when he came to pick up a bag, but someone told him that, so he decided to bring his kids up to my apartment instead of leaving them in the car. I couldn't believe he really brought his faking kids with him, so my girlfriend kept them occupied and fed 2 of them in the other room, and he was holding his baby and I just sold him a bag to get him out of there and went to the bathroom after, so he wouldn't try and talk to me or hang out. I came out after a few minutes and he was still on my couch and shooting up and barely stopped his baby from falling off the couch. Told him he needed to leave and had my girlfriend call CPS and tell them everything. He and his wife went to jail for a little over a week before getting bailed out, and I don't know anything past that cause I stopped talking to him and selling to him. So it wasn't me, but in jail I met this woman whose mind was absolutely fried from mental illness and drugs, like permanent zombie punctuated by flipping shit. Her boyfriend looked like the poster boy for This Is Your Face on meth campaigns. Apparently the tip-off came from a dealer. She had an 18-month-old. From pretty much day one until that age, she was physically and sexually abusing the child. Let her boyfriend join in sometimes. Had made videos of her sexually abusing the baby girl with a screwdriver among other horrors. I didn't see it, but heard the description from people in the room for the trial. Got charged with 2 counts of capital sexual battery on a child 12, a slew of lesser charges. Tried to plead insanity, lost a jury trial, and received 2 life sentences. Too light a sentence, if you ask me. It made the news. If you're curious, search for Melissa Bailey, Charlotte County. Personally the closest I came was when my friend/client was too damn high to take his 12-year-old son to from school. He was a sweet kid, so I started just driving him and picking him up myself every day for a while, but otherwise the house was clean, food was fine, and he had TV/console games. So I never went as far as calling CPS, even though that stuff definitely won't make up for your dad being passed out and or strung out in the bedroom all day every day. I'm not a drug dealer, but I am a veterinary student. In one of our first ethics classes, we were basically hit with the fact that we, as vets, are responsible for calling animal control in possible neglect or abuse cases because 80% of animal abusers also engage in domestic violence against partners, kids, etc. Apparently it's much easier for animal control to explore a property than it is for child protective services, and AC will often act as a gateway into CPS becoming involved if they are able to document any evidence for domestic violence while investigating an animal's welfare. Kind of heavy stuff to lay at the feet of future vets anyways. I called AC on my neighbors because they had a young dog, Pitty with cropped ears, of course, tied up to a pole with a short leash for months before I realized what was going on. It cried all day and night and the owners would scream at it from inside the home to shut up. They would toss it a bag of food every now and then, although it was obviously starving. No shelter or water in the bowls unless it rained. and it would eat it or then sleep on the bag, because it only had a small radius to move, and didn't want to lay in its own excrement. I had debated asking the family, who had children by the way, if I could take the dog from them, but was afraid of confrontation if they found out I was the one who reported them. Also, I wanted to make sure that they were on record for abuse and couldn't own another dog again. I researched the euthanasia rate at the local AC, very low. They only euthanize aggressive or basically terminal animals. I was impressed, and then reported. The dog was quickly removed from the premises by authorities and I never heard anything else. I don't know what happened to the dog, but I have to imagine anything was better, including death, than its old living situation. Also, I have never called CPS, but I did report my abusive parents to my old high school counselors recently as my youngest sister is still a minor attending classes. I was planning on estranging myself from my family for the betterment of my mental health, and I needed to make sure a responsible adult could keep tabs on her. My parents wouldn't get her help for her severe bulimia. She was under 85 pounds, 5 feet 5 inches, last time I had been allowed to see her. Hey all, this is my first post trying not to be funny. My dad was a big time drug dealer. He was extremely abusive. Some of the abuse included feeding me a half a peanut butter sandwich if I begged for it enough every 2 to 3 days, locking me in a closet for months on end. The only time I was allowed out of the closet was to clean up after his parties. When not in the closet I used to have to try to sleep naked in the basement on the concrete under an AC vent. I once fell asleep while making a bed. I woke up to him punching me in the nose, breaking my nose, and chipping a tooth because I slept in a bed. I used to have to steal dog food and food out of the pans when he made me cook for them, but without them being able to tell. His supplier knew about the abuse, and his daughter was moving out, so they asked for my help moving, so my dad of course sent me to help. I showed up ready to help, and they told me to go sit in a chair, so I did. Confused I asked them what they wanted to move, and they told me they knew what was happening at my dad's, and took pictures of my swollen face and bruises. They then told me if I ever decided to get out of the situation I was in they would give the cops the pics anonymous. One day I worked up the courage to wait for my dad to pass out drunk in his chair. I could hear his snoring from the bathroom. I kicked the door open and ran. I was originally put in respite foster care because my dad played it off as I was troubled, but then they actually have the cops the pic and a statement which saved me. But what makes me sad is that my 3 other brothers who dealt with the same abuse were interviewed by COS, and just as the youngest started to tell them about what was really going on, the second oldest interrupted the interview and stopped it. To the people who helped me and other get out of these situations, thank you. You're a true blessing. To my brothers, I hope you made it out well. Sorry for the terrible punctuation. I was homeschooled to hide the abuse. I lived with my mom until 7th grade, but she was abusive too. I moved in with my dad hoping for better, but it was worse. Foster care was a blessing. I was kicked out at 16, but I now have a wonderful girlfriend of 5 years I have never even raised my voice with, about to start my own company, and living a life I only thought existed in movies, and the people who kept me from going back to my dad are true heroes. This doesn't have anything to do with calling CPS on a client. However, in school we just had an assembly where a theater group came in and acted a story about the County Lions. The County Lions is an organization that spreads across the UK and maybe other countries. I'm not sure, as I only discovered what the term County Lion is at school, which sells drugs, guns, other weapons and other illegal items/substances. The members of the County Lions are growing continuously, and they have several little steps ranging from different steps and amounts, but all similar, from dealer to dealer. If this happens to you, tell the authorities before they send you scouting for new members, because if you recruit members you're more likely to get a worse sentence than if you were forced into doing the trafficking. Step 1. Find a vulnerable person. This means they will look in busy areas. Bear in mind these dealers move around the country a lot and find people who look vulnerable. Step 2. Discover their vulnerability or vulnerabilities and use it to grab their attention. If they don't have a vulnerability, then use that against them, because that is their vulnerability. The example in the performance was that this couple was poor and couldn't buy their girlfriend a dress, so he gave them £20 and that got their attention. They told them about your job, how it makes a lot of money, Again, it grabbed their attention. Point step 3. Build up a healthy relationship with them. Make them feel like your best mates. Make them not doubt your decisions, like you're the best. They trust you. Point step 4. Offer them the job. And at this process they will most likely get their bank details. The target will most likely say yes. Step 5. Feed them drugs, alcohol, even if underage, as the characters in the performance was 15. This means their lives will depend on it. Point step 6. Make them feel trapped. Make a scenario that makes them feel guilty, trapped. The context in the performance was that they got one of their own mates to rob the targets of a gun. They got the gun back and sold it anyway, but the others thought they owed him. They believe they owe the dealer, and therefore to pay it back will have to work that job forever. Step 7. Beat them up / threaten them. This varies from cutting, bagging, stabbing them in the intestines, meaning they will have to use a bag inside of them to excrete, and beating them up. Other threats vary from abuse to sexual abuse, and so on. They then might send you to recruit new traffickers. If you or anyone you know is stuck in something like this, help them. If they don't speak out when they are just a trafficker, their punishment will be much worse. However, yes, the person who is doing these steps to them might be doing it because someone above them has made them. Or it's just for fun. It is a pyramid scheme that goes on forever. Be careful out there and don't become part of something like the county lions.